In 2034, the United States government will run out of money to pay your Social Security check in full. Not maybe. Not if things go badly. They will run out. The date is locked in. The trustees' report just confirmed it. Again. And when that day comes, you'll get 81 cents on the dollar. Every month. For the rest of your life. Now, here's the thing. This isn't a natural disaster. This isn't a hurricane nobody saw coming. This was designed. Piece by piece. Decision by decision. For 90 years. I'm going to show you exactly how they built this machine. How it worked. Why it's failing. And who knew it would fail all along. This is the story of the greatest retirement system ever created, and the slow-motion crime that's killing it. Let me take you back to 1935. The Depression is still choking America. Old people are dying in poverty at rates we can barely imagine today. 1 in 2 seniors lives below the poverty line. 1 in 2. Franklin Roosevelt signs the Social Security Act with 23 pens, handing them out like party favors, because he knows this moment matters. This is the deal. You work. You pay in. And when you're too old to work, we pay you back. It's elegant. It's simple. And for the first few generations, it's almost too good to be true. Because here's what nobody tells you about the early days. The very first Social Security recipient was a woman named Ida Mae Fuller. Schoolteacher from Vermont. She paid into the system for exactly 3 years. 3 years. Her total contribution? $25. $25. Over her lifetime, she collected $22,000 in benefits. That's not a typo. She got back almost 900 times what she put in. Now, was Ida Mae Fuller a thief? No. She was a teacher. She worked hard her whole life. But most of that work happened before Social Security existed. The system gave her full benefits anyway. And it did the same thing for millions of others. The first generation. The greatest generation. They paid almost nothing and received almost everything. This is called legacy cost. $30 trillion of legacy cost, to be exact. The bill for being generous to people who built America before the system existed. And we're still paying that bill today. For 40 years, from 1935 to 1975, Congress raised the payroll tax 14 times. 14 times. Because they understood something simple. If you want to pay out more benefits, you need to bring in more money. The contribution rate started at 1%. By 1990, it hit 6.2%. And then something strange happened. It stopped. The rate has been frozen at 6.2% for 35 years. 35 years. Benefits kept growing. People kept living longer. Medical costs kept exploding. But the tax rate? Frozen solid. Like someone hit pause on the revenue side and just walked away. I honestly can't believe they got away with this for so long. By the 1980s, the cracks were starting to show. The 1982 Trustees Report dropped a bomb. Social Security would run out of money by July 1983. Not in a decade. Not in a generation. In months. There was panic. Real panic. President Reagan appoints the Greenspan Commission. Alan Greenspan. The Wizard. 15 experts. Locked in a room. Find a solution. Except they didn't. The commission deadlocked. Completely stalled. Democrats wanted tax increases. Republicans wanted benefit cuts. Nobody would budge. For months, they talked in circles. Finally, in December, Reagan's people and Tip O'Neill's people started negotiating in secret. Just the two camps. No commission. No public process. They hammered out a deal in backrooms, then brought it back to the commission and said, "Here, sign this." And the commission signed it. That deal became the 1983 amendments. And here's what everyone gets wrong about 1983. People love to say it was balanced. A mix of tax increases and benefit cuts. Shared sacrifice. That's the myth. But look at the actual numbers. In the short term, yes, there were tax increases. They sped up some scheduled payroll tax hikes. They delayed the cost of living adjustment by 6 months. They made some benefits taxable for the first time. That brought in cash fast. It plugged the immediate hole. But for the long term? The 75-year fix? It was almost entirely benefit cuts. The big one was raising the full retirement age from 65 to 67. That doesn't sound like much. 2 years. But it's a permanent reduction in benefits. If you retire at 65, you take a cut. If you wait until 67, you're just getting what used to be the normal benefit at 65. It's a cut, no matter when you claim. On average, the 1983 amendments reduced lifetime Social Security benefits by 19%. 19%. And no new revenue was scheduled to offset it. This specific detail makes me sick. Now, the architects of 1983 projected their fix would keep Social Security solvent until the 2060s. 80 years of breathing room. But something happened. The depletion date started moving up. First to 2050. Then 2042. Then 2037. Now 2034 for the combined trust funds. 2033 for old age benefits alone. What went wrong? Not demographics. That's the excuse you'll hear. Too many retirees, not enough workers. Baby boomers broke the system. But that's garbage. The baby boom ended in 1964. The actuaries knew exactly how many boomers there were. They knew we'd live longer. They built those assumptions into the 1983 fix. The ratio of workers to retirees today is almost exactly what they projected in 1983. So if it's not demographics, what is it? Earnings inequality. This is the smoking gun. In 1977, Congress set the Social Security taxable maximum, the cap on how much of your paycheck gets taxed, to cover 90% of all earnings. 90%. They assumed that most earnings growth would happen below the cap. Across the board. Rising tide lifts all boats. But that's not what happened. Wages for middle-class workers stagnated. Flatlined. Meanwhile, wages for the top 10% exploded. Corporate executives started getting paid in stock options, bonuses, and compensation packages that made their grandparents' salaries look like pocket change. In 1983, about 6% of workers earn more than the taxable maximum. Today, it's still about 6%. But here's the key. Those 6% are now taking home a much bigger slice of the total pie. In 1983, the taxable maximum covered 90% of earnings. Today, it covers 82%. 18% of all earnings in America are now above the cap. 18%. That's double what the system was designed to handle. Billions of dollars in wages that never get touched by the Social Security tax. It is terrifying to look at these numbers. The Social Security actuaries ran the analysis. They traced the entire financial deterioration since 1983 back to one cause: earnings inequality. Not people living longer. Not legislation. Not fraud. Just the simple fact that rich people got richer, and the Social Security tax couldn't reach them. If the taxable maximum had stated 90% coverage, like the 1977 law intended, the 75-year financing gap would be about a quarter smaller. A quarter. Social Security's payroll tax income would be 8% higher every year. Right now. Today. Forever. To get back to that 90% coverage, you'd need to roughly double the current cap. From $176,000 to around $350,000. That would help. A lot. But it still wouldn't recapture the 4 decades of lost revenue. Now, there's a second factor. Smaller. But real. Disability. In the early 1980s, the Reagan administration tightened the rules for Social Security disability insurance. Hard. They denied benefits to people who were clearly impaired. They kicked people off who were already receiving benefits. Severely disabled people. The public revolted. Congress revolted. The courts stepped in. Eventually, the harshest measures got rolled back. Disability enrollment went back up to more reasonable levels. But here's the setup. Because disability was at an artificial low in 1983, lawmakers redirected a big chunk of the disability payroll tax over to the retirement fund. They figured, hey, disability is fine, let's use that money for old age benefits. Then, when disability enrollment climbed back up, they had to shift some of that tax back. The retirement fund took a hit. Disability is solvent now. Solid through the entire 75-year window. But the retirement fund, OASI, that's the one running dry. And the retirement fund is 14 times bigger than the disability fund. So even if Congress authorized borrowing between the two, it would only buy about 1 year. From 2033 to 2034. 1 year. The 2025 Trustees Report lays it out in black ink. Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund depleted in 2033. Combined OASDI Trust Fund depleted in 2034. After that, incoming revenue covers 81% of scheduled benefits. 81%. That means, on day 1 of depletion, every beneficiary takes a 19% cut. Across the board. Retirees. Widows. Disabled workers. Survivors. Everyone. Now, nobody knows exactly how the Social Security Administration would implement that. One option, pay everyone on time, but only 80 cents on the dollar. You expect $1,500, you get $1,200. Every month. Another option, hold everyone's checks until enough money comes in to pay the full amount. So you wait. An extra week. Maybe two. Every single month. For the rest of your life. Either way, it's a disaster. The average retired worker benefit right now is about $1,975 a month. Only 2% of beneficiaries get more than $4,000. Disabled workers get even less. Widows get even less than that. These are not people with cushion. I was shocked when I found this document. The Urban Institute ran the projections. If benefits get cut 19% in 2034, median per capita income for people over 62 drops by 14%. 14%. Poverty rates spike. Especially for Hispanic and Black seniors. Especially for people with disabilities. Some of the very poorest might get a little help from Supplemental Security Income, SSI. Maybe. If they qualify. But SSI pays about 75% of the poverty level. That's not a rescue. That's a different kind of drowning. And the SSA would be flooded with millions of people calling, panicking, applying for SSI, asking what happened to their checks. The economic damage spreads fast. Social Security benefits equal about 5.7% of GDP. A 1/5 cut knocks off more than 1% of GDP. 1%. That's a recession trigger. Seniors stop spending. Businesses lose customers. The whole economy contracts. This is not a glitch. This is a collapse. And Congress has known it was coming for decades. So here's where we stand. 9 years out. Maybe 8, depending on how the economy moves. The trust fund is burning down, and the people in charge are still arguing about whether to bring a hose. Let me tell you what happens if they do nothing. It's a Tuesday in 2034. You're 72 years old. You've been retired for 7 years. You check your bank account. Your Social Security deposit is short. Not by a little. By $375. You call the 800 number. You wait on hold for an hour. When someone finally picks up, they tell you the trust fund is depleted. They can only pay 81%. That's the law. They're sorry. You hang up. You look at your bills. Mortgage. Property tax. Utilities. Medicare premiums. Prescription drugs. Groceries. You've been skating by on Social Security alone because your pension vanished in 2009 and your 401k never recovered. Now you're $375 short. Every month. Forever. What do you cut? Heat in the winter? Medicine? Food? You're not alone. 67 million people are getting the same call. 67 million. The panic spreads like wildfire. People who are planning to retire next year rush to file early, afraid they'll miss out entirely. They lock in lower benefits for life. People already retired start pulling money out of what little savings they have left, burning through their safety net. The news runs the footage. Long lines at Social Security offices. Seniors crying. Protesters outside the Capitol. The stock market tanks because nobody's spending. Consumer confidence collapses. It's 2008 all over again, except this time the victims are old and they can't go back to work. This is what doing nothing looks like. Now, you're probably wondering, is there any way out? Yes. But the options narrow every year we wait. The most talked about fix is raising revenue. And the public supports it. Overwhelmingly. The National Academy of Social Insurance ran a poll. 85% of Americans say they want to maintain or increase Social Security benefits, even if it means raising taxes. 85%. That includes 76% of Republicans, 93% of Democrats, 85% of independents. This is not a partisan issue. This is a survival issue. When you ask people about specific options, the support gets even stronger. 68% support eliminating the payroll tax cap entirely. 65% support eliminating it only on earnings over $400,000. 57% support gradually increasing the payroll tax rate that workers and employers each pay. The package people like best? Eliminate the cap for earnings over $400,000, raise the tax rate to 7.2%, and add some targeted benefit improvements for widows and caregivers. 82% support that. Across every demographic. Every political line. But when you ask about benefit cuts, the numbers flip. 48% oppose raising the retirement age to 68. Only 37% support it. People are twice as likely to be strongly opposed as strongly in favor. And cutting the cost of living adjustment? Even less popular. Here's what that tells me. The American people are not stupid. They understand the math. They're willing to pay more to preserve the system. But they do not trust Congress to cut benefits fairly. Because they remember 1983. They remember the retirement age increase that was sold as shared sacrifice but landed almost entirely on workers. They remember the promise that it was a permanent fix. And now, 40 years later, here we are again. So what are the actual options? Option 1. Raise the payroll tax rate. Right now, it's 6.2% for workers and 6.2% for employers. To close the 75-year gap entirely, you'd need to raise it to about 8.025% each. That's an increase of 1.825 percentage points. For someone earning the average wage, $72,300, that's an extra $1,319 a year. Split between worker and employer. Is that a lot? Depends on your perspective. It's about 2.5% of your paycheck. But it permanently solves the problem. And it still leaves lifetime benefits far exceeding lifetime taxes for most workers. Option 2. Raise or eliminate the taxable maximum. Right now, earnings above $176,100 are exempt from Social Security tax. If you make $1 million a year, you stop paying Social Security tax in March. The rest of the year, you're tax-free on Social Security. That's the deal. Eliminating the cap entirely would close a huge chunk of the gap. About 73% of it, according to the actuaries. You could also raise the cap to cover 90% of earnings, like it did in 1983. That would mean a cap around $350,000. Or you could create a donut hole. Tax earnings below $176,000 and above, say $400,000, but leave the middle alone. That polls well because it only hits the very top earners. Option 3. A more progressive benefit formula. Right now, Social Security replaces 90% of earnings for people at the poverty level, 32% for people at average earnings, 15% for high earners. You could raise that first tier to 100%. Give low-income workers full replacement, and slightly reduce the 32 and 15% tiers to offset the cost. This helps the people who need it most. The single mother who worked part-time because she was raising kids. The immigrant who only worked in the U.S. for 20 years. The gig worker who never had steady wages. It's targeted. It's efficient. And it doesn't add to the deficit if you balance it with reductions at the top. Option 4. Targeted benefit improvements. Caregiver credits. If you leave the workforce to care for a child or an elderly parent, you get credited with earnings equal to half the national average wage for up to 5 years. That boosts your future benefit without penalizing you for doing unpaid labor. Widow benefits. Right now, when one spouse dies, the household loses a third to half of its Social Security income. A proposal would guarantee the surviving spouse at least 75% of the couple's combined benefit. That keeps widows out of poverty. Bridge benefits. For workers aged 62 to 66 in physically demanding jobs, construction, nursing, manual labor, create a bridge benefit that supplements early retirement. These are people whose bodies gave out before 67. They can't retrain. They can't keep working. Give them a dignified exit. These improvements cost money. But they're popular. And they address real suffering. Now, all of these options assume Congress acts in time to phase things in gradually. But what if they don't? What if we get to 2033 and there's still no deal? Then you need a stopgap. Bridge financing. And that means general revenue. General revenue is a scary phrase in Social Security world. It means money from income taxes, corporate taxes, estate taxes, anything that's not the payroll tax. Social Security has always been funded by dedicated payroll taxes. That's the social contract. You pay in, you get benefits. General revenue breaks that link. But here's the thing. Social Security already receives some general revenue. The income taxes on benefits go into the trust fund. That's general revenue. It's just labeled differently. And in 2011 and 2012, when Congress cut the payroll tax temporarily to stimulate the economy, they backfilled the trust fund with general revenue. The precedent exists. If Congress waits until the last minute, they may have no choice. Gradual fixes take time. If you raise the payroll tax 1/20th of a percentage point per year, it takes a decade to build up enough revenue to prevent depletion. But we don't have a decade. We have 8 years. Maybe less. So you'd need a big, fast infusion. Either a sudden tax increase, which is politically toxic and economically disruptive, or a temporary general revenue transfer. Borrowing from the general fund, with a plan to pay it back once the gradual fixes kick in. The public supports this. 75% of Americans prefer rerouting other government funds to Social Security rather than letting benefits be cut. 52% support doing it without repayment. 23% support it as a loan. When asked which revenue source they prefer, estate taxes poll the highest. 57%. Then general revenues. 46%. Then a carbon tax. 42%. Capital gains tax. 36%. What does that tell you? People are willing to pay. They just want the burden to fall on wealth, not wages. Now, let me be clear. I'm not here to sell you on one fix over another. I'm here to show you the options. And to tell you what happens if we choose none of them. Because the window is closing. Every year we wait, the fixes get harder. The cuts get deeper. The tax increases get steeper. And the trust fund gets closer to zero. If Congress waits until 2033 to act, they'll have 1 year to prevent catastrophe. 1 year. They'll probably authorize the old age fund to borrow from the disability fund. That buys a few months. They'll probably reallocate the payroll tax rate between the two funds. That buys a few more months. Then they're out of tricks. At that point, you're looking at either a brutal, immediate benefit cut or a massive general revenue bailout with no time to plan repayment. Either way, it's chaos. And the people who suffer most are the people who can least afford it. The 72-year-old widow living on $1,200 a month. The 65-year-old carpenter whose back gave out and who's waiting for his disability claim to process. The 78-year-old black woman whose survivor benefit just got cut and who's deciding between pills and groceries. These are not abstractions. These are your neighbors. Your parents. You. So here's what you need to do. First, understand your own situation. Go to ssa.gov. Pull your earnings record. Run the calculators. Figure out what you're projected to receive. Then calculate what 81% of that looks like. Because that's your 2034 reality if nothing changes. Second, plan accordingly. If you're close to retirement, consider your claiming strategy carefully. The conventional wisdom is to delay until 70 to maximize your benefit. But if there's a real chance the system collapses before you get there, that advice might not hold. Run the scenarios. Be realistic. Third, diversify. Social Security was never meant to be your only source of retirement income. It was meant to be the foundation. If you have any ability to save, save. If you have any ability to work longer, consider it. Not because you should have to, but because the system might not be there the way you think it will. Fourth, and this is the most important one, make noise. Call your representatives. Not once. Regularly. Tell them you're watching. Tell them you vote. Tell them this matters. Because the only reason Congress will act is if they're more afraid of you than they are of lobbyists and donors. Social Security is not going bankrupt. Let me be very clear about that. Even if the trust fund hits zero, revenue keeps coming in. 81% of benefits can still be paid. But 81% is not 100%. And for someone living on the edge, that 19% is the difference between dignity and disaster. This system has kept tens of millions of Americans out of poverty for 90 years. It's the most successful social insurance program in history. But it was built on assumptions that no longer hold. Rising wages for everyone. Regular tax increases to match rising benefits. A rough balance between what people pay in and what they take out. Those assumptions are dead. Wages rose for the rich and stalled for everyone else. Tax increases stopped in 1990. And the legacy debt from the early generations is still crushing the system. Congress has three choices. Raise revenue, cut benefits, or let the trust fund collapse and deal with the fallout. The first option is popular, fair, and sustainable. The second option is unpopular, cruel, and politically dangerous. The third option is catastrophic. I know which one I choose. But I'm not the one who decides. You are. Through your votes. Through your voice. Through your refusal to let them kick this can one more time. In 1983, they told us the fix was permanent. 75 years of solvency. We're 42 years in, and the money runs out in 8. That's not a failure of the system. That's a failure of leadership. They knew earnings inequality was rising. They knew the tax cap was eroding. They knew the legacy debt was compounding. And they did nothing. For 35 years, the payroll tax rate has been frozen while benefits grew and costs exploded. That's not an accident. That's a choice. And now the bill is coming due. The people who made those choices, the politicians, the lobbyists, the executives who fought every tax increase and every cap raise, they'll be fine. They have pensions. They have portfolios. They have options. You don't. Your Social Security check is it. For most of you, it's 70% of your income. For some of you, it's 100%. And in 8 years, if nothing changes, it's going to be 19% less. I honestly can't believe we're here. 90 years. 3 generations. Hundreds of millions of people lifted out of poverty. And we're going to let it collapse because Congress won't ask billionaires to pay Social Security tax on their full income. The fix is not complicated. It's not mysterious. The actuaries have run every scenario. The public supports the solutions. The math works. What's missing is courage. So I'm asking you. Demand it. From your senator. From your representative. From every candidate who asks for your vote. Tell them you know what's coming. Tell them you know how to fix it. And tell them if they don't act, you'll remember. Because in 2034, when that check comes up short, they're going to say nobody could have seen it coming. They're going to say the problem was too complex. They're going to say they did their best. Don't let them lie to you. You've seen the numbers. You know the truth. The trust fund doesn't go broke because it has to. It goes broke because we let it.